to do that. Jody's doing announcements, so I'm passing this off to her.
Boy, I can't do quite like Teresa. There's nothing like the energy that is Teresa, I'll tell you. So if you'll pull out the inside of your bulletin and take a look with me, we're starting right off with the fall festivals. Who's excited for the fall festivals? Yeah, you know, these festivals are bookends. They're in the spring. You've got 3 of them. Then you've got the closing one at the beginning of the summer, Shavuot, and then you've got the 3 in the fall. So the very first one in the fall starts on Saturday, September 16th. So we decided, since we already meet on a Saturday, to just go ahead and have our celebration here on Saturday morning. We'll have a potluck afterwards, and you know there is nothing like the sound of that shofar. And also, I want to brag just a little bit. I don't know anybody, and I've been in a number of different places, who blows a shofar as good as Adam Spears does. I don't know what it is, but he just can, he's got it. He has got it. Anyway, below that, you'll see we have our Prepare to Stand class. I am really excited about this class because I really feel very strongly that this message is just right for now. So Andrew Brunson was a missionary for 25 years in Turkey, the last 2 years of which he spent in a Turkish prison. And this man had been a believer for a long time, and led many others to the Lord. But he said it was so hard, far harder than he thought, and he almost lost his faith that first year in prison. And then God just gave him tools to help him make it through. He didn't think he was going to be released, but amazingly, I think it's because of all the international prayer that was backing that man up, he was released. Came to America a couple years ago, and God said, all that stuff that I taught you while you were in prison? It's for the folks in America because persecution is coming. So I want you to get out to them the tools that I have taught you. So he did, and he put it on videotape. They're short. They're 15 to 20 minutes each. He made 8 of them, and they're good. But I'll tell you, the study guide that goes with them is really excellent. It's just written well by a pastor from Colorado. And so we're only going to meet for 5 weeks. It starts Thursday nights, September 14. We'll go from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. It'll be in this room right over here, the Shabbat School room, and we'll watch the video and we'll have a time of small group discussion. We'll divide into small groups and we'll see if we can knit some of what God has taught this amazing believer into our own lives. So we're prepared too. So prepare to stand. I'm going to pass around a sign-up sheet. The only reason I need you to sign up is so I can make sure that I have a study guide for each person who wants to attend. Okay? These are my favorite calendar. Through the years, we've had a number of messianic calendars. They generally start in September on trumpets, the very festival we were just talking about. And the reason I like these so well is because they visually clearly show when the day begins. So just like in Genesis 1, it was evening and then it was day. So in God's reckoning, the day doesn't start when you're asleep on your pillow at 12 midnight. In his calendar, it starts when that sun goes down. And they show it. They do a nice job of visually showing that. Here's showing it for Sabbath, but they do it on all the festivals as well. It's just a really well put together calendar. So we like to make these available to you. They're on the back counter. They're $15 each. So they go kind of quick. We just have the ones he orders and then they're kind of gone. But you might enjoy something like that. We're going to offer Hebrew. So hold on just a second. So You would expect Hebrew to be unique from all other languages, and it is. So God has planted gems within the first language that give insight to him. But you need to be able to read those 22 foreign letters to be able to feast on these gems. I know that's a mixed metaphor, but that's the best I can do. Who can take this class? So any adult or child who can read English and can sit for an hour and a half, because that's how long the class is. Okay? The class is free except for the cost of the materials. And this is a perfect class to take with your kids. It's a really good one to take with your kids. You don't need to know any Hebrew prior to this. This is a beginning Hebrew class. And by the end of November, you'll be able to read Hebrew. You won't know all the vocabulary, but you'll be able to read Hebrew, and you will be legs up in being able to research 80% of your Bible, which was written in Hebrew. So I'm going to pass around the clipboard. This is the last day for you to be able, the last Saturday, I should say, for you to be able to sign up. I mean, if something happens and a week from now you go, well, I really think I want to take that class. I mean, call me. I'll make it work. I'll Xerox some stuff till we can get you your materials or whatever. But really, conveniently, this is the last day for you to sign up. So I'll pass around those clipboards again. This is the text with the yellow cover that if you have it at home, you can just put, no, I don't need you to purchase this text for me. And so you'll know the handwriting guide. Linda, where are you? Yeah, this is the one I was talking about that you'll need. But you'll have a nice cardstock copy. And if anybody has one of these yellow books from past classes, you know, once you know the letters, you don't need this anymore, and you're willing to sell it to me, I'll buy it from you. I'd be glad to buy it from you. So just let me know. Okay, enjoy the teaching today. I know this man, and he put a lot of time into it.
Does anybody want to
Pass around
the... Thanks, Johnny. Good morning. Let's pray. Father, we come before you. We thank you for this day. We just worship you in our worship of you, Don and Cecilia and the rest, and in the teaching as well. Father, I pray that we learn something that'll glorify you, change our lives to make us look more like you, which should be the goal. In your name, amen. We've been working on the book of Revelation. We've recognized this structure of two parallel stories. And one is about the blessings out of the Torah, in Leviticus, you'll find, if you do these things, I will bless you and reward you. And it goes on for quite a few verses, and it lists the things. And the other is, if you don't do these things, then I'll bring judgment upon you. Well, at the end of the age, if this Old Testament text hadn't been abolished, what would you expect? The culmination of the age should be okay, let's see how you've done. And that's exactly what we find. We find these two parallel stories. One is directed to people that believe and are working to be holy and righteous. And there's a wedding at the end of the book that we have learned, where we've been introduced to the players of the wedding so far. We're in chapter 8, ready to go into 9. And then the other story, of course, is the judgment that is coming out of these Old Testament passages in Leviticus primarily, and then Deuteronomy, which is basically Moses' effort to do kind of a wrap-up, a conclusionary statement in Deuteronomy's case to the Israelites just before they went into the land. Well, this Revelation is the same thing. I think it was written by John from God with the same theme. Just before you go into the promised land. For us, we're not thinking about going into the land of Israel from Egypt. Metaphorically, we are, though. What we're thinking about is the second coming, when we get a fulfillment of the good news, which is the gospel message, which comes right out of the Old and the New Testament. That good news is we get to dwell with God forever. And he's got a wonderful plan in store for us. Yeah, totally. So these two stories are being presented like any good author writes. They are occurring, we're jumping back and forth between these two stories, and God is developing these stories simultaneously in the text. So right now, we're in the midst of these trumpets, which are part of the judgmental story that's coming out of the Old Testament and being finally fulfilled in this text. God is, basically, you can look at it like this. I've given you time, and this is applicable not just to us, but for all people in all ages that have lived. I've given you lives and time I've given you a precious gift, life. And in that life, have you served me? Have you recognized me? Have you made efforts to follow me and fulfill the plan that I have for you? Or have you gone your own way? Have you fulfilled your own plan, your own desires, and have disregarded all of my directions for you? At the end of the age, God is basically pouring out these judgments. And we're going to come to an ultimate crescendo here, but we're not there yet. This crescendo is being poured out as either blessings or curses on the people that are alive at the very end of the age, which, by the way, happen to be a large majority of the people that have ever lived. So with that, last week we covered the first, second, and the third, and a little bits of the fourth trumpet. Keep in mind that these trumpets are the 7 trumpets that are blown on during the daily services that used to happen when the temple was operating. There was one blown at the beginning of the day, usually around 6 in the morning. The gates of the temple were opened at the blowing. 3 more were blown in the AM service, and 3 more were blown in the PM service. And we went through all the service, the details about that, I'm not going to reiterate that. But just to remind you, again, we see this 4-3. 4 are blown in the AM, 3 are blown in the PM. And throughout all of these 7s, these little, I'm going to use language, if you haven't been here, you're going to get lost real quick. But this mini menorah concept of multiple 7s in the revelational text, we see this throughout the text. There's 4 and then 3. There was 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and then 3 more seals. There's 4 trumpets that we see here, and then 3 are singled out at the end, and they're called woes, right? We're going to talk about those today. The third one, just to remind you, was this star that's called wormwood, and it falls to the earth and makes all the fresh water poisonous. And if you do some research on this Greek word, it has a Hebrew equivalent word, of course. It basically is a reference to absinthe. Now, absinthe is a chemical that people drink, still drink, but if you drink it too much, you kill yourself. So it had a kind of a comeback during the Roaring 20s. People would start to drink this poison. They'd put it in their alcoholic drinks because if you don't drink too much of it, you get a hallucinogenic response, right? But if you cross the line, you die. So it's kind of one of those roll the dice kind of thing, Russian roulette kind of a drug. You want to be very, very careful. And we talked about how this in the Hebrew and here, it's referred to, it made the waters bitter. It's a very bitter tasting chemical. And if you do some research in Hebrew of this bitterness, you find it all over the Old Testament text. And last week we learned that, remember, these judgments are tests to see how you and I are doing. Okay? So we learned that this star, this bitterness, in the Old Testament was used by the high priest to test husbands that were suspicious of their wives' purity. Remember that? And the wife would end up dying when she took this bitterness if she was guilty, right? And so last week we talked about she might not be. And if she isn't, it has no effect on her. The judgments that are coming and are happening in our day won't, when I use the word death, I'm not necessarily talking about physical death. There's going to be quantum leaps more spiritual deaths at the end. Well, though they're actually one for one, but because everybody that dies, they're actually, it's not spirit, but we use that word spiritual. It's actually your soul that dies in the end. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to take this going to go through this test. And what does the text tell us here in Revelation? That men will die from this test. Why? Because people are going to be tested by God to see what kind of relationship they have with Him. And they either pass, and if they do, they get blessed, just like out of the Old Testament, the laws, we are going to be tested the same way. So the question is what does your relationship look like? I'm not asking if you're perfect. I'm asking if you're repentant. And if each day you're trying to look more like Him. And I'm not making salvation equal to works. I'm just saying that somebody that is a believer, one of the signs, this comes right out of James. There should be signs of your faith. And what are those signs referred to? Works, fruit, right? So, how many of us have fruit? That's all I'm asking. If you're moving forward, you're proving to God, your groom, that you're trying to please Him. So, this book, if you haven't learned yet, is all about a relationship. God is testing your relationship. One of the reasons I'm not a big fan of, well, I got my ticket into heaven. I went forward 30 years ago and I'm good to go. Got baptized. You know what happens to those people? They're the ones Satan picks off because they're easy fodder. They don't. I think it's John, it says at the very end of the book, I've given you enough evidence for you to believe. The religion of the Bible is never anything in regards to blind faith. It's an evidentiary faith. If you look at the pages that in the Bible, why does God stick his neck out and talk about geology, ancient cities and dates and kings? He names people that lived 4,000 years ago. All of this geography that is described in detail, it better be right. You could literally draw the land of Israel and many other places that surround Israel by the descriptions given by the authors. If it was wrong, if they had the mountain in the wrong spot, what would you conclude? Somebody in Italy made this up 500 years later. But no, what we are discovering is all of these people from Pontius Pilate to Nebuchadnezzar lived, and they lived during the time that the Bible said this city actually exists. The names that were used by people 3,500 years ago are actually being discovered as used from archaeological discoveries 3,500 years ago. Like how many know somebody named Bertha? One hand. Names kind of end. They lose their, like how many new babies do you know that are named John? My name. Very few. When I was growing up, I wished for the day when I was in school that I would be the only John in the class. So when the teacher called out, "Yes, John," she was referring to me. Now, John is like fading a miserable death, The Bible uses names that are no longer used, but were used 2000 BC. And it's been proven. God stuck his neck out because of what reason? He wanted to prove that what he says is accurate in as many ways that your palate can take. Why? Because it's an evidentiary religion. No other religion on the globe is evidentiary. It's all experiential, and most of the books are not written anywhere near the times that they claim to be writing about. 500 to 2,500 years later are the documents written about every other religion that exists from ancient times. I'm not talking about Jehovah's, JWs, or Mormons. Anyway, the book of Revelation is an evidential book. The things that are described in it will actually happen, and they are sourced from material that did actually happen. So, this fourth trumpet, let me read it. The fourth angel sounded. This is Revelation 8:12. The fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them would be dark, and the day would not shine for a third of it. Kind of sounds like what we've been experiencing lately, right? But you could still see the sun even at 9 o'clock. You can kind of see this orange orb on the horizon, right? Think about if it was so smoky that No light got through even till 9 or 10. And it went away at 3 or so in the afternoon. That's pretty smoky. Would not, the stars wouldn't shine for a third of it, and the night in the same way. Then I looked and I heard an eagle flying in midair saying with a loud voice, whoa, 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 we'll get to that. So what's going on here? This may sound ridiculous, but keep in mind where we're at. We're closing in on the very end. And I think that it's actually God is showing restraint. It's only a third. He's not, God could go, that's it. Done. Everybody line up because you're all getting judged. But that's not what he does. Why do you think he's going through all of this? All of these warnings in the letters and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and now these thunders, the trumpets and these horrific things that are occurring on earth. Why? Because God's a mean ogre? No, we're going to see his heart at the end of the 6th trumpet. It's going to be stated. But what we see is God's motivation. His motivation is that he wants nobody to miss out on his salvation. And so he's tried everything else. Now it's the end. And he doesn't just blow one horn, one trumpet, and say, okay, line up for judgment. He's going, no, I'm going to do it in phases, and it's going to get worse. Like Matthew 24 talks about the same time period. In fact, it overlays these events in Revelation. What does it do? He says it's like birth pains. They come on slow, and then they get more and more frequent and worse and worse. That's what Revelation is all about. Why? Because there's a baby being born, and he wants as many of us to be reborn. He is not looking for the judgment because you're a sinner. He wants to be the father of life, right? And he's promised us all life. But it's a choice. We don't get it for free. But the price isn't very much. All we have to do is believe. But the text that he's given us is evidentiary based. So he's winnowed down the amount of faith. If you really study it, no matter what ology you want to look into, if you study it, you will find God everywhere, whether it's physics, archaeology, or the biblical text, and every ology in between, you will find God. Even in the heavens, yeah. So, trumpet 4, God showing his restraint because he wants all people to come to him. These events are not something new. They're basically fulfillments of Old Testament prophecies that are finally organized in this structure in the book of Revelation. We can look at Joel 3:15. It says, quoting it, the sun and the moon shall be darkened, and the stars will withdraw their shining. Sounds like what we just read here in Revelation, the 4th trumpet, doesn't it? These prophecies in the Old Testament are overlays. We've talked about this before. The beauty of the book of Revelation is you can order all of these end-time Old Testament prophecies in their chronological order. Why is that of value? Because there's one verse here in Revelation, but it gives you enough information to connect Old Testament prophecies that might give you 1 or 2 chapters that expand the actual event being described here in Revelation chapter 8. So another one, Isaiah 13, 10 and 11. For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not flash their light. The sun will be dark when it rises. All these are end time prophecies. The sun will be darkened when it rises, and the moon will not shed its light. So I will punish the world for its evil, and the wicked for their wrongdoing. I will also put an end to the audacity of the proud, and humiliate the arrogance of the tyrants. They're tyrants today? Deuteronomy 28. Moses' wrap up here. And you will grope at noon as the blind man gropes in the darkness. And you will not prosper in your ways, but you shall only be oppressed and robbed continually with none to save you. Darkness also is a reflection of the lack of light, isn't it? So how many of us walk around in darkness at night, but feel that you can see? On a spiritual sense, there's no reason to be fearful, right? Because you have eyes to see, whether it's light or dark outside. What I think is going on here, amongst other things, remember God is so layered in his wisdom that there's always a simple understanding. Yep, the moon and the sun and the stars, you're not going to be able to see them for a third of the day. That's the simple understanding. But there's layers of meaning, isn't there? And I think a deeper layer is God is withdrawing himself. It's a kind of a fulfillment of that Thessalonians verse that says, I will give them over to a reprobate mind. God is a gentleman. And if you tell him enough times, go take a hike, he will go, I'm going to honor your request. And so you can see this picture, this darkness that's coming. Let me tell you, further on in the book, it's not 1/3, it's complete darkness. But it's a picture of God withdrawing his presence. Guess who he's still knocking on the door to? Those that haven't made up their mind. If you haven't made up your mind, or if you find somebody that hasn't made up their mind, or there's a sliver of a chance, get after them. Because God is drawing and wants to draw all men unto himself by using his agents, which are you all. In a practical sense, when you shroud the earth 1/3 of the incoming energy, light is energy, right? What's going to happen on the face of the earth? Anything good? Well, if you like darkness, it'll be good, I suppose. But on a practical sense, what does the sun help be? It helps it grow food. Why? It takes 2 things to grow food, doesn't it? Energy, light, and what else? Nutrients, including water, right? The ground is still there, but there's no light coming. And so, can you imagine regions that typically grow plenty of food Where are they mostly located? In the temperate regions, which are places that get cold during the winter, usually, like Nebraska. Great place to grow corn, but not during the winter. Well, guess what? That growth line, if you're going to knock out 1/3 of the incoming solar radiation, moves south. All of Ukraine is a great, Australia in the southern hemisphere, Argentina in South America, all of those food growing areas now shrink and come closer to the equator, right? Not a good time to grow food.
It doesn't say, is this on?
You turn the mic on? It's on?
What it says on.
Hello?
Yep.
It doesn't say how long this is going to happen. Is it overnight or is it for a month or 6 months? Do we know?
We don't know. It doesn't say. The implication is, like all of these, as we're learning, they kind of, like even the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, they're all like balls being pushed downhill. So deception starts. How long does it last? A day or a week? No, it goes all the way to the end. These wars go all the way to the end. These plagues and famines that we've seen go all the way to the end. I'm not saying that 1/3 of the day will be not visible from this point on in the text to the end, which, by the way, is we're getting close to a time signpost, which is 3.5 years, okay? So we're closing in on that. So, we're not talking about decades here. We're talking about a handful of years, but I don't think that this is saying that from this point on, most of the stars and the moon and the sun are only going to be there for 2/3 of the day. I'm just saying that there's a judgment coming that's going to cause intermittent availability of incoming solar energy to the earth, which is going to cause havoc. And a signpost that it only gets worse is at the very end. Give you a little heads up. The very end are the bowl judgments. There's 7 of them. One of them says the entire kingdom is turned to darkness. Now, is that literal or spiritual? The correct answer is both. Yes, thank you. Okay. We've talked about, this 4th light. We call it the shamash. It's in the center. And if you take a look at the sevens are everywhere in the biblical text. Where's the first shamash? Where's the first menorah? 7. Where's the first grouping of 7s in the biblical text? Genesis chapter 1, thank you, right? 7 days it took God to create the place. What happened on the 4th? This one. God is referred to in the Old Testament as the shamash, or the sun, right? Because figuratively, our sun does the same sort of things that the sun, capital S-O-N, does. He creates or allows for life, doesn't he? What happened on the 4th day of creation? He created the sun and the moon and the stars. What's being impacted here on the 4th trumpet? 1/3 of it's being removed. So figuratively, God is, and during the course of these judgments, God is taking back the creation for the purpose of what? Destroying it. No. What's he getting it ready for? His presence. And what does he need to dwell here? Very good. You guys are smart. Purity. So all of this is cleansing and purification. In the process, he's asking you to come to him. And I don't just mean via a salvational thing. I mean a holiness thing as well. Come to him. Choose to fix what's wrong and draw closer to him. Okay. So we know God is light, right? That's the one of the metaphors that is very intriguing, actually. I'm talking about the rays or the photons that light. We've learned in physics that light is, it's both a particle and a wave, right? Very kind of interesting. We've talked about in that past. I won't refer to that, but God is withholding this himself, light, from the earth. In John, get there, 3:16, which we all know, right? But putting it in its context, let me read a little bit further. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. The contrast is between life and death, okay? For God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world, but so that the world might be saved. Saved from what? Death. Might be saved through him. The one who believes in him is not judged. The one who does not believe in him has been judged already, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. What? They've already been judged. What's going on there? They've already been judged. It's like God knows, doesn't he? And so as he's pouring out, no judgment is cutting off people's choice. Oh, shoot, I was going to make my decision tomorrow for God. But yet this trumpet blast blew. No, God knows, right? And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world. It's a capital L, light. So it's talking about the Messiah, right? That the light has come into the world, and people love the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light and does not come to the light, so that his deeds will not be exposed. Yeah, that's pretty blatant, isn't it? That passage. Think about when you were a kid. You totally exposed everything you did to your parents. No. You went out of your way to subterfuge what had happened, actually, right? To make them believe that you were this angelic child, but in actuality, not so much. We our nature seems to be one of, it's kind of like, Adam and Eve. Did they run and find God? God, we just ate the apple. It's not an apple, but from the tree, right? No, they hid themselves and they tried to cover the result of their sin, right? It's like God's not going to figure it out. So will the end time people. They know the truth, but they choose to believe a lie. Where do I have that? It's in, where it is. It's in Romans 1. It's powerful. Hold on. No. Where is it? No. It's, I put it in my notes, but it's not here. Let's see if I can find it. Let's scroll down. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. Starting in 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodly and unrighteousness of people who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. How many of us suppress the truth? How many bother to learn the truth? Because that which is known about God, wait a minute. That which is known about God is evident within them. They know. For God made it evident to them about his existence. Because that which is known, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived, being understood by what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or thank him, but they became futile in their reasoning, and their senseless hearts were darkened. This is a crazy chapter. You got to go home and read it if you haven't. Romans 1 and 2. It goes on in this vein about the law and how it's still applicable and how it's applicable to the Gentiles and the Jews who got it firsthand. Powerful. But we'll stop there. Even though they knew God, they became futile in their what does that mean? Futile in their reasoning. Faulty reasoning. Why? I don't want to know truth. I have a friend, but we go way back to college. And I've told this story before, but I'll tell you again. We were driving down the road, and he knew I was a believer, and I have always liked to debate. So we were debating, and I was telling him, and he was losing from my perspective. And his response proved the case. But he said, John, will you stop it? I don't want to be responsible because I was telling him that, hey, you're responsible to act according to biblical ideals. And he didn't want to know it because then all of a sudden he knew. He did not grow up in the church, didn't have any religious background, but we loved each other because we like to duck hunt or something. I don't know. We just were very good friends. And to the point where we still talk on the phone. He lives in Utah today. But he didn't want to know more truth for fear that he would be held accountable. How many of us don't study the Bible because we don't want to know what we should be doing? Good, no hands went up. God gave us this book not to scare us away, but to find out. Once you figure this out, you're dangerous. Once you figure out that holiness, conformity to God's ways make you powerful in every area, business, every area of your life, you're dangerous to unbelievers, but mostly the enemy, because you're going counter to his motives and principles and ways. Yes, he has principles too. His kingdom operates by laws and principles. Someday we might talk about that, but not today. And then let's go back to Isaiah. Isaiah 13. Go back there. These trumpets can be wrapped up by this Old Testament bit of text. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. Therefore, all hands will fall limp, and every human heart will melt. They will be terrified, pain and anguish, labor pains. They will look with astonishment. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming, cruel, with fury and burning anger. And it goes on in this vein. He will exterminate its sinners from it, the stars of heaven and their constellations. I've already read these two verses. He will extinguish their light. And then 12, I will make mortal man scarcer than pure gold, and mankind the gold of Ophir. That, we've I don't know about the gold of Ophir, but gold, we could put all the gold mined in the history of mankind into a Olympic swimming pool, the same width and depth and height. Gold is not very common, is it? I mean, compared to the globe and all the other minerals and metals that are found in it, gold's pretty rare as a comparative ratio, isn't it? Man, God's equating metaphorically that these judgments, we've already learned that 1/4 by the 4 horsemen get killed. And here we're going to soon see that these trumpets, as we get into the 6th one, 1/3, which if you add up 1/4 and 1/3 is 1/2 of the population, is going to be dealt with. Yes.
I had a question. Testing. So are you saying that during the judgments, people are still able to choose?
Absolutely.
Because I was taught growing up in church, that once the servants of Yah are sealed, that's a close of probation. So I'm learning new things here.
Yep. No, I've heard of that. The problem is that's not what the text says. We are in the New Testament. It talks about all believers are sealed. Ot is the Hebrew word. Are sealed on their hand or the forehead as a sign to God that they are believers. These 144,000 are specially sealed for a special job. And we've seen that they're groomsmen, but in the chapters ahead, we're going to see what they are in charge of. Never, like we've spoken already, never does there's 4 places in the Bible that refer to these 144,000, or you could make a case that they represent the 144,000. Nowhere are they given the job of being end-time witnesses or witnesses at all, okay? So this is a made-up concept. Nowhere does it say, okay, here's the line in the sand in time. Once you cross that line in the sand, I'm sealing no one else. And all these judgments that are post this line in the sand, they can't be saved. The whole purpose of judgment in your life has been what? Purification, turning around and going the other way. God's going, I've tried kindness, I've tried this, I've tried education, now I'm going to bring a little trouble into your life, right? Maybe that'll turn you around. Well, that's what he's doing here. He's tried everything else. Now these judgments are being poured out on the earth by God to give one final chance to turn. And there's even, just before the last event we're going to see in chapter 16, there's a crying out by God. Please turn. And then Armageddon. Yeah.
Was Yeshua on the cross and the thief, was that sort of a sign, that last minute you can change?
Yeah, you could say it's metaphorical.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's any time before the great white throne judgment, which we'll see in chapter 20, after the 1,000-year reign. Anytime prior to that, you make a decision for God, God's going to welcome you into his family. Right? Now, does that mean that we wait 999 years into the 1,000-year reign? Or in our case, does that mean we wait till, I'm going to wait till this last sign here before I'm going to make a decision? It's kind of like people go, I'm busy right now. When I'm on my deathbed, I'll make a decision for God. Does that mean we should do that? No, that's stupid. Right? Who knows if you're going to what happens if you're in a car wreck and you die like that? You don't have a deathbed experience. Plus, what did I say earlier? Living for God is a blessing. It's not a curse. It's not restriction. The restrictions are there because God built us and he doesn't want us putting water in the gas tank. Do this, you won't run very well. Do this, you'll look good going down the road. So let's jump into the next chapter. Chapter 9. Well, we probably should actually read the last verse of 8. Then I looked. The first 4 trumpets have been blown. Then I looked, this is John, and I heard an angel flying in mid-heaven, saying with a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to those who live on the earth, because of the remaining blasts of the trumpet of the 3 angels who are about to sound." What? It hasn't been bad enough? Matthew 24 is being unfolded here as far as Yeshua's message to the disciples that's represented in the text of Matthew 24. It's like birth pains. They get worse towards the end, right? And they get shorter and shorter in time. It's the same thing with God's kingdom. As it arrives, it starts to arrive quicker and quicker, and the effects of it getting close get worse and worse. Only if you're on the judgmental flow or story. But there's another story going on here, isn't there? There's one where God is blessing certain peoples, and those are people that are his. Whoa, whoa, whoa. This word is oide. You probably heard that word, right? Many times, this is not a unique word in the Old Testament. It's used many times. The typical translation is like lamentation. It's a lamentation. It's like a crying out of lament, of pain and suffering when it's being used in the Old Testament. Find it here. So, three more angels with three more trumpets are about to blast, and the temperature is going to go up. And the fifth trumpet is the weirdest of all the trumpets. It's got imagery that is very difficult. I always like to hear what other people teach about the book of Revelation, especially things that are like weird. And there's multiple, just hugely metaphorical representations in Revelation. I always like to hear what other people say. And so this week, I searched and was studying about what other people think this represents, what we're about to see. And it's like, man, the problem is most of these people don't come from a Hebraic perspective. They don't realize that Revelation, the key to understanding it is to understand the Old Testament. Because the New Testament, its foundation, including the book of Revelation, is the Old Testament. So if you don't know the Old Testament, you come up with even bizarrer interpretations. The key to Revelation is the Old Testament. So if you don't know what that is, find it in the Old. Not find it in your imagination. Find it in the Old Testament. John is everywhere. I've tried to make this point, but everywhere he's quoting or referring to comic book. No, he's referring to Old Testament passages. Why? Because he wants you to link it so you can have a better understanding of what we're going to meet locusts coming out of a pit here soon. Let's meet them. Then the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven, which had fallen to the earth. And the key to the shaft of the abyss, or in some versions, the bottomless pit, was given to him. He opened the shaft of the abyss, and smoke ascended out of the shaft, like the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened from the smoke and the shaft. Boy, the sun is just having a bad go of it. Bad week here, isn't it? Then out of the smoke, so you got smoke, and then out of the smoke come locusts upon the earth, and power was given them as the scorpion of the earth have power. Okay, let's stop there. So back in I think 1967 or 8 or 9, somewhere in there, an author, very well known, wrote a book, Late Great Planet Earth, I think it was. And these locusts are helicopters. So, okay, this week I'm trying to just learn what other people are thinking. And I'm listening to this one preacher. He's up there, he's teaching on the book of Revelation, chapter 9. And he's going, these locusts are helicopters. I'm going, what? I thought that came and went as a bad idea. But no, it still lives today. And this was like 2 years ago, this little YouTube lecture was posted. So I guess they're helicopters. Now, they might be helicopters. But, you know, and the line is well, John doesn't, God allows him to see this real life thing going on. He's doing his best to describe these locusts that are, really, that's what so he's going, oh yeah, it looks like locusts. Now, I think a better way to approach, to understand this, is John is very thoroughly steeped in the Old Testament. I think he saw locusts, and I think he saw what the locusts were because he knows what they are as they come out of them. Where did they come out of? It's a hint of what they are. They're not helicopters. Where do they come out of? The bottomless pit. So in order to, okay, if you're going to do the research, you'd go, wait a minute, okay, these things get locked up in the bottomless pit. First off, what's the bottomless pit? It's the abyss. It's the place before Yeshua went down after he died. He went down and released the captives, and he let them out of the abyss. Sheol is the Hebrew word. He let them out, and he let those that had been locked up there because of their sin. Everybody previous to Yeshua's resurrection was locked up in Sheol. Well, what about all those people that Abraham and all those wonderful people that lived? Had their price for their sin been paid 3,500 years ago? No. This character that we're going to learn, this star we're going to soon read here, his name is Abaddon. We're going to learn a little bit about him. But we find that I've got 5 minutes. I'm not going to be able to get there. We're going to find next week what these things are that come out of this pit, what these things are that got locked up in this pit. It's all recorded in the text and in other ancient texts that we'll get introduced to, like the book of Enoch. It expounds on, remember that greasy chapter that you never want to read, like Genesis 6, where it says that the sons of God saw the women of men and decided to take them as many as they wanted, and they had offspring. And what were they called? Nephilim. And it goes on in that day. Well, the book of Enoch expounds on these things, exploits, and who they are. In the Old Testament, we can find out what this next week. We'll learn what the sons of God. Who are the sons of God? It says the sons of God lusted after the women of men. Well, who are the sons of God? We're going to learn who they are, because they're the ones that got locked up into this pit, and they're the ones that get released to do some really bizarre thing. Ultimately, here in Revelation, what's going to happen is they are going to join forces with mankind. They morph into this horse-like being. We'll learn about them next week. They morph into this horse-like being, and on their backs are mounted men. It's a covenant relationship, the imagery there. We'll explain it next week. And they go and attack and form an army that is expounded multiple places in the Old Testament. We'll learn about which war this is, who the attackers are, and what do you suppose, just take a wild guess, who are they after? Just, what's their focus? Who are they trying to kill? Believers. And one other group, Jews. That's their target market. We'll learn about them next week. It's not accidental that all of these wars are Jewish or Hebrew or Israelite centric. All of these wars are in and around the land of Israel. Satan hates believers, and he will jail you, persecute you, and kill you if he can to do one of two things: convert you. Remember, he has rules, he has a kingdom. Or if he can't do that, take you out, because he doesn't need witnesses that stand up for the other kingdom of light. That's what this, if you read all of these texts that talk about Satan's agenda, that's always what he's about. What? Yeah. Where's my? Give me a minute. Let's go to 1 Peter. Two. Let me read this to you, starting at verse 1. So we've got this, I've just kind of described Satan's agenda, how he wants to take you out. You're the target. He wants to either flip you, deceive you, or remove you. We're almost to chapter 10, right? Let me tell you, 10's really good news. Because 10, what it says is the imagery is exactly like the Exodus. Uses the exact same language. We'll talk more about it when we get there. But he sweeps up on eagle's wings his people and takes them into the wilderness to a place he's prepared. It's like a quote out of Exodus, because that's what he did for the Israelites coming out of Egypt. He swept them up. It's the actual language used in Exodus. Takes them up, puts them on his wings, and takes them to a safe place. And we'll get more into 12 when we get there. It's chapter 12. But also, 1 Peter 2:1. Therefore, rid yourself of all malice and all deceit and all hypocrisy and envy and all slander. Oh boy, that's a mouthful. And like newborn babies, long for the pure milk of the word. So, our religion, our relation is information-based. Milk, yearn, pursue the word, so that by it you will grow in respect to salvation. In other words, you'll grow beyond just being a baby. If you have tasted the kindness of the Lord and coming to him as to a living stone, which has been rejected by him, but is choice and precious in the sight of God. You also, as living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house for a holy priesthood to offer spiritual sacrifices that are acceptable to God through Yeshua HaMashiach. What kind of sacrifices can we make? There's no temple. Yeah, self, right? For this is contained in Scripture. Behold, I am laying in Zion a choice stone, a precious cornerstone, and the one who believes in him will not be put to shame. This precious value, then, is for you who believe. But for unbelievers, a stone which the builder rejected, this became the chief cornerstone, and the stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. For they stumble because they are disobedient to the word, and this they were also appointed. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood. You feel like you're chosen? You feel like you're special? Get it through your head. You are. No matter what you think about yourself, stop deceiving yourself. You're specially chosen by God. Many are called, few are chosen. If you believe in God, you are chosen. God chooses you. You're a holy nation, a person for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellence of him who has called you out of darkness into the marvelous light. For you were once not a people, but now you are the people of God, and are not, you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Behold, I urge you as foreigners and strangers to abstain from fleshly lusts. Keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles. And then I want to read, where was that? I just saw it. Is that Daniel? This is we'll get more into this when we get into how Daniel chapter 2, this vision of this statue overlays on top of this. Will be next week. But I want to read these two verses. It's this statue is representative of Satan's kingdoms throughout the ages and how he's tried to pervert and deceive mankind into his kingdom. And the imagery here is this, you're familiar with. It's this metal statue that Nebuchadnezzar has a vision about. But bottom line, this stone, this cornerstone comes and hits the feet of iron and clay, and the thing falls down, turns to dust, is blown away. It doesn't even exist anymore, right? And in that context, verse 44, and in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed. And that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these previous kingdoms. It's prophecy about all the kingdoms that Satan has controlled since 600 BC. This kingdom will endure forever. Just as you saw a stone was broken off from the mountain without hands, and that it crushed the iron, the bronze and the clay and the silver and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will take place in the future. So the dream is certain and its interpretation is trustworthy. During times of trouble, whether it's end times or just you're having a bad hair day, God is trustworthy. You can depend on his promises. That should be the source of our stability. And how many of us are making that our source? Or do we source our bank account or our good job? Or where do you get your stability? Where do you get your confidence for a stable future? It should be from God. Why? Because he has promised us, no matter what we go through, that this prophecy and its interpretation is trustworthy. God is trustworthy to come with eagle's wings and sweep you away to a place that only he knows, where he can protect you. The imagery is so intimate that we'll see as we get in the coming chapters. Respond back to him intimately, because he wants that kind of he doesn't want just a high five kind of relationship. He wants a moment by moment. Take him with you wherever you go. Amen? Let's stand for the Aaronic blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his face upon you and grant you peace. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shabbat. Shabbat Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shabbat. Shabbat Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat 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 Shalom. Hey, join me in the blessing over the bread. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam ha'motzi lehem min ha'aretz. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Shabbat shalom. Have a wonderful Shabbat.